Imagine you're standing at the edge of your camp, maybe 40,000 years ago, and a figure appears at the tree line. You don't know this person. You've never seen their face before in your life. They're too far away to hear anything they might say, too far away to read a single detail about their intentions. All you have is a shape, a posture, a face starting to come into focus as they get closer. And somewhere in the next second or two, before you've consciously thought about it at all, your brain is going to hand you a verdict. Friend or threat, approach or retreat, welcome them to the fire or grab a spear. You won't remember deciding. It'll just feel like you already knew. That snap judgment, the one you're making about every unfamiliar face you'll ever see for the rest of your life, in less time than it takes to blink, didn't come from nowhere. It's one of the oldest, fastest pieces of software your brain runs, built during a period of human history when getting that call rung in either direction could genuinely end your bloodline. Trust the wrong stranger, and you might be inviting a rival group scout straight to your camp. Distrust the right one, and you might be turning away a potential ally, a trading partner, someone with knowledge your group desperately needs. So how did evolution build a system fast enough to make that call before you're even aware you're making it? And here's the more uncomfortable question. Is that system actually any good at its job? Let's start with just how fast this really is, because the number is genuinely startling. Researchers studying facial trust judgments, most notably psychologist Alexander Todorov at Princeton, have found that people form an opinion about whether a face looks trustworthy in as little as 100 milliseconds. That's 1/10 of a second, faster than you can read this sentence out loud. And here's the part that should really catch your attention. Giving someone more time to look at the same face barely changes their verdict. The snap judgment made in 1/10 of a second and the judgment made after 10 full seconds of staring end up looking almost identical. Whatever this system is doing, it isn't gathering more evidence over time. It fires once, fast, and then mostly just defends its initial call. So what's actually driving that instant read? Not anything close to real information about a stranger's character. You don't have any of that yet. What you're actually reacting to is facial structure that resembles specific emotional expressions. Wider eyes, slightly raised eyebrows, mouth corners turned up even a fraction. These features get read as trustworthy because they resemble the shape of a face already expressing something friendly or happy or non-threatening. Features that resemble an angry expression, lower brows pulled together, a harder mouth, get read as untrustworthy for the exact same reason in reverse. Your brain isn't evaluating a stranger's honesty. It's pattern-matching bone structure and resting expression against a mental library of what safe faces and dangerous faces have historically looked like, and it's doing that matching almost entirely without your permission. What makes this even more convincing as an ancient built-in system rather than something you simply learned growing up is how early it shows up and how consistent it is across completely different cultures. Studies of infant development have found that wariness toward unfamiliar faces, what researchers call stranger anxiety, reliably emerges around 6 to 9 months of age, well before a baby has had any meaningful chance to learn social rules about whom counts as safe. And when researchers have compared facial trustworthiness judgments across different cultures, the core pattern holds up remarkably well. People from very different backgrounds tend to agree on which facial structures read as warmer or more hostile, even without shared language or shared upbringing. That kind of consistency, showing up this early and this broadly, is exactly what you'd expect from something built into the species rather than taught by any one culture. Underneath all of this sits a small, extremely fast structure buried deep in the brain, the amygdala. Brain imaging studies show the amygdala activates rapidly in response to an unfamiliar face, well before slower, more deliberate reasoning circuits have had a chance to weigh in. It's the same rapid threat appraisal system involved in a lot of the other instinct-based content on this channel, the one that makes you flinch at a rotten smell before you've consciously registered why, the one that makes you recoil from a bitter taste before you've thought about what it might mean. This is that same fast first, think later architecture, just aimed at a face instead of a flavor. Here's where you need to slow down though, because a system this fast has an obvious weakness. Speed and accuracy are not the same thing, and this one was built almost entirely for speed. Researchers running trust games, where participants decide how much money to risk with a stranger based purely on a photograph, have repeatedly found that trustworthy-looking faces don't actually correlate with people behaving more honestly. A face that pattern matches to safety can belong to someone who will absolutely take your money and vanish, and a face that reads as harsh or unfriendly can belong to someone scrupulously honest. Which means this ancient system, running at full confidence, is making a fool in a tenth of a second that has essentially no real predictive power over what a stranger will actually do. It evolved to be fast enough to save your life in a small, high-stakes encounter. Nobody optimized it for accuracy, because for most of human history, accuracy wasn't really available as an option. A snap judgment, even an imperfect one, beat standing frozen at the tree line gathering more data while a genuine threat closed the distance. There's a strange edge case in all of this worth pausing on too, because it shows exactly how specific this pattern matching system really is. You've probably felt an unsettling, hard-to-explain discomfort looking at a face that's almost right, but not quite. An unusually realistic mask, certain animatronics, some AI-generated faces, a doll's face lit the wrong way. Researchers call this the uncanny valley, and one leading explanation ties directly back to everything we've just covered. Your trust and threat system depends on smoothly reading real, subtle expression cues, and a face that's close enough to real to trigger that reading, but subtly wrong in ways you can't consciously pinpoint, produces an error signal instead of a clean verdict. It's not that the system fails quietly in that moment, it's that it fires loudly, flags something as deeply off, and can't tell you exactly why. But instinct alone clearly wasn't enough for actual survival, because plenty of encounters with strangers weren't simple threat or friend situations that could be solved in a tenth of a second. Sometimes you needed to actually trade with people you had every biological reason to be wary of. Sometimes a stranger carried information, skills or goods your own small group didn't have, and turning them away on the strength of a snap facial judgment alone would have been a genuine loss. Which means early human groups needed a second system, slower and more deliberate, layered on top of the fast one. And just like the water video covered, that backup system wasn't biological, it was cultural. One of the clearest examples of this shows up in something historians call silent trade, sometimes recorded under the name dumb barter. Groups who didn't share a language and who had every reason not to trust each other on sight developed an entirely wordless system for exchanging goods safely. One group would leave items at an agreed spot and withdraw out of sight. The other group would approach, inspect the goods, and leave what they considered a fair trade in return, then also withdraw. The first group would come back, check what had been left, and either take it or leave it untouched to signal the offer wasn't acceptable, repeating the whole cycle until both sides were satisfied. Nobody had to look anybody else in the eye and make a snap facial judgment about trustworthiness at all. The system built the trust gradually, transaction by transaction, entirely around behavior instead of appearance, solving exactly the problem the fast instinct was bad at. Alongside systems like that, groups built other slower trust verification tools, shared rituals and greetings that signaled group membership before any real interaction began, reputations that traveled between groups through storytelling long before someone from another camp ever arrived at yours, repeated peaceful contact that slowly built a track record no single glance could ever provide. There's even a biological layer supporting this cultural patchwork. Research on the hormone oxytocin shows it strengthens bonding and trust toward people already inside your circle, while some studies suggest it can simultaneously heighten wariness toward clear outsiders. In other words, your body isn't just running one trust system. It's running a fast, sloppy, snap judgment layer for total strangers, and a slower, socially reinforced layer for people your group has actually vetted over time, with a hormone quietly turning up the contrast between the two. Which brings this story into a genuinely uncomfortable modern problem. For nearly all of human history, encountering a completely unfamiliar face was rare. You might meet a handful of true strangers in an entire year. The system evolved under those conditions, calibrated for occasional high-stakes encounters where a fast core actually mattered. Now think about how many unfamiliar faces you actually process in a single day. Commuters, co-workers you've never spoken to, hundreds of faces scrolling past on a screen, video calls with people you'll never meet in person. That ancient tenth-of-a-second system is still firing on every single one of them, with the exact same confidence it had at the edge of a prehistoric campfire, even though it was never built to run at anywhere near this volume, and even though, as the research keeps showing, it was never especially accurate to begin with. And it's not just firing uselessly in the background, it's actively shaping real outcomes you'd probably assume were based on something more careful. Researchers have found that this same instant facial read measurably influences hiring interviews, first impressions on dating apps, and even how credible a witness or defendant seems to a jury. All situations where people assume they're weighing real evidence, while a tenth-of-a-second gut reaction to bone structure is quietly sitting underneath the whole judgment. The stakes of that ancient system misfiring haven't gone away. They've just moved from a tree line to a courtroom. There's an even sharper version of this problem showing up right now, and it's one your ancestors never had to worry about at all. This system can be deliberately manufactured. Scammers have long understood that certain faces and voices read as instantly trustworthy, and they exploit exactly that. AI-generated faces, built and tested specifically to score higher on trustworthiness ratings, are now being used in fake profiles and fraud schemes precisely because they trigger that ancient 100-millisecond verdict in your favor before any real information has been exchanged at all. Your Treeline instinct was built to protect you from a stranger you could see with your own eyes, standing in front of a fire it took real effort to reach. It was never built to defend against a face generated by software, optimized frame by frame to say exactly what your amygdala wants to hear. So how did early humans end up trusting or distrusting a stranger instantly? A fast, ancient facial pattern matching system handled the split-second core, optimized for speed over accuracy because speed was what actually kept small groups alive. When that wasn't enough, when real exchange, real cooperation with genuine strangers was actually necessary, culture stepped in with slower, more deliberate systems, silent trade, shared rituals, reputations passed by word of mouth, bonds reinforced by biology itself. Two systems, one fast and rough, one slow and careful, running in parallel this entire time. And now, for the first time, both of them are being deliberately gamed by faces that were never attached to a real person at all. The next time a stranger's face gives you an instant, wordless gut feeling, before they've said a single word, before you have any actual information at all, you're not imagining it, and you're not being irrational either. You're just running the exact same tenth-of-a-second program someone standing at a tree line was running 40,000 years ago, still convinced it knows something you don't, in a world that now knows exactly how to lie to it. And it's not the only instinct still running quietly in the background. We've also covered the instinct that saved early humans from poisoned water, the one that had you flinching at a smell and testing a sip before you ever understood why. Links in the top right corner. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more of these.